Hi, and welcome to the Loud Girl Who Reads podcast, episode 5. I am so excited for this episode. It's not like all the other ones, where usually the way I do this is, doing a topic and having me talk about it, and then not only that, I have a question that I ask readers, but this one's a little different. So stay tuned for a little bit about me, who I am, and how I became a writer and such an avid reader. So definitely stay tuned for that. Welcome back. I'm so excited to have you listening to the 5th episode of this podcast. It's not that big of an achievement to have 5 episodes of something, especially considering if you add it all up, it's about, 2.5 hours, if that, probably a little less than that now that I'm thinking about it, that you'd actually be able to listen to get to this point. But still, I think it's quite an accomplishment. It's 5 weeks of me doing this. And so I felt like for this episode, I should be doing something a little different. Now, I'm a little bit more casual. I'm doing this at 9:30 at night, which doesn't sound like it's very late, but it is a Saturday night, which makes it even later. But first, let me just say that the only way that I am able to do my podcast and write books and things like that is through your support. So go ahead and like this video. If you're on Spotify, go ahead and give this a 5-star rating wherever you like. Interact with the poll. Do that if you're on YouTube, you can like it, you can comment, you can subscribe. Any of those things really help me to be able to eventually monetize this. So thank you so much for your support, and hopefully I can keep making more episodes like this. Everything you do gives me the encouragement I have and helps us to reach more people. So my name is Lindsay Forkel. I am an author of 2 books, soon be 4 books. I've actually written 5. I've read my entire life. I've got probably over 300 books on my bookshelves right now, and I've read probably, I would like to say about 50%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you know most people's TBR list, to be read list, you know that that's a decent amount of books. So, there's that. I am also a children's pastor. I'm also a substitute teacher. I'm kind of, especially creativity-wise, I'm kind of a jack of all trades whenever it comes to that, and for this 5th episode, I just felt like it was probably a good idea to go ahead and not necessarily introduce myself as much as explain why I am such a good reader, an avid reader, and, how I got into writing, things like that. And so to be able to do that, I decided to, forego doing question and answers and, my thoughts on certain things and jump straight into my first 15 years of my life as a reader. So basically, I started reading whenever I was about 7. I think that's just about whenever everything started clicked. And I even remember being at church because I was a PK. I still am a PK my entire life. My parents have been youth pastors. They've been children's pastors. Right now, they're lead pastors of a church plant. And so I've always been in church. Now, if you are not a church goer and you're listening to this, it's not necessarily you have to go to church. I personally have beliefs, and they might not be the same as yours. And I think that anybody can enjoy a podcast for readers. And I will say a lot of what I read is clean fiction because I do think that there's, real side effects to what reading trashy books does to your brain. It's just, you might act a little worse towards people. You might be totally fine with it, but that's just my personal standpoint. But anyways, I was PK my entire life, still am. And I remember one day being at church and I was walking and I was reading a book. And I was having the hardest time reading it. And I remember the second it just clicked in my head of what the words meant. And it was just such a crazy idea to have that happen. Bear, go lay down. I have my dog in here for the first time. Well, actually the second time. Probably not a good idea. But let me just preface by saying that he's in the room. But anyways, so that was kind of like the first time everything clicked. Now I think I said in the first episode that one of my favorite series as a kid was the Baby Mouse series. Oddly enough, I've never heard anybody who's ever read these books. They're like a comic book manga type style, but everything is black and white and pink. And the only color that's shown is pink. And it's about this girl who's like a mouse in this like zoo type world where everyone's different animals, and she goes through different things and she uses her imagination, dreams up these big ideas, and then obviously they fall a little bit short of those big ideas. But anyways, those were my favorite books that I would go through and read, a couple a night, because they were, that fast-paced kind of comic book thing, and I also had them memorized at that point. Like, there was no, I had it in my mind of what I was reading, and I would just zoom through them. And those were some of my favorite books. I also enjoyed, Diary of a Kid. I liked Ever After High series, which kind of a niche series to like, but it's basically like the fairy tale version of Monster High, a little bit more fairy tale based than necessarily monsters. But yeah, so that's kind of where I started with reading. I was reading Ever After High, I was reading Baby Mouse, I was reading Diary of a Kid, and all these different books just kind of strung me along and had me reading, and I would stay up late reading. And my oldest sister read a little bit whenever she was younger, kind of fell out of it. Then my middle sister, my second oldest sister, she, never got into reading, never understood it. Not necessarily understood it, but she never got the draw from it. And so I was definitely the reader of my family as a younger child, and I always knew that my mom liked to read too. I knew that she was a reader whenever she was younger, and we would talk about that on occasions. I would read Little House on the Prairie, and then we'd watch it together, things like that. And it just made everything, click. As I got older, though, about 13 years old, 12 or 13 years old, I will say I had this feeling. It was almost like a pressure, but also not a pressure, because that sounds so dumb to say it like that. But whenever I was, going through middle school age stuff, I was homeschooled as well, so that didn't help at all. But I just felt like I was supposed to read. I'm this reader. I'm the reader of the family. I'm supposed to read. I have all these books that I haven't read. But then at the same time, it felt like I could not read. Like I physically could not get myself to sit down and read a book. And I got my first phone whenever I was 13, which sounds crazy now considering, what age kids get phones, which is a whole other topic. But, I had all these books. I had all these dreams of being, the reader kid, and I was always not necessarily a smart kid, but because I liked to read, it was like I liked school, which I did always love school. I loved doing tests. I loved writing papers. I loved every aspect of school. But then whenever it came to sitting down and reading, I just couldn't get myself back into it. And I don't know what it was about it. Like even rereading books that I used to like, it was just hard for me to sit down and do them. Now I still did like my artsy stuff because I've always crocheted, painted, this, that, and the other. I just couldn't get myself. So yeah, it was just hard to get back into reading. Now there was one book that kind of brought me out of that slump, and it's actually right behind me, The Gifting. Now, I had gotten it for Christmas. It was that mixed with another book. I had gotten, I don't even know. I'm a writer and I don't even know. But I had got that book and another book behind me. And both of them have become my favorite books. Maybe I was 15. I'm thinking now that I was 15. And I might have read throughout that time, it was 2 or 3 year span. I might have read throughout that time, but it was nothing like this. And it was kind of like my discovery of young adult books. Because before then, I just didn't really, it didn't really click. And I had some other books that, I read. But those were kind of like the stepping stones. Because, okay, so I read Hunger Games. I read practically all of those and listened to a couple. And I did the same with Ted Decker's 3. That one was kind of like the kickstart. Right? That was like my stepping stone, and that was like my first official, I actually listened to the audiobook. That was my first official book that I kind of listened to, and it clicked back into me, and that was at 14. But then at 15, I read the Gifting series, and it was Fifth Avenue Story Society by Rachel Hawk. Now, both of those books were kind of like, it was like a light bulb went off of me. And now, the Fifth Avenue Story Society is a romance book. I would not call it a young adult book, but The Gifting is definitely a young adult teen series. Now, it's ironic because they were completely different sides of the spectrum, but at the time, I was just going through, I was kind of going through like those teenage weird phases mentally, and so that was just kind of like, it was like, okay, I can actually... I get why people, get so invested in books. I remember with the Gifting series, I started the first book. I read it for free on ebook. That was probably my first ebook that I actually read all the way through. And I had read the first on ebook. I had gotten it, I think it was for free. But then the second and the third, I bought a gift card to Barnes & Noble with these points that I've been saving up on this app. Bought a Barnes & Noble gift card. Got the next 2 on e-reader. And I read both of the books. It was a 3-day span. Like, it was over one weekend. I read all of them. And then, right after I read all 3 of them, I reread them. It was that, like, I reread the entire series twice, and, like, I read it twice in 1 week. It was, not that it was, like, no, I'm not trying to bash the writer. It wasn't even that it was that, marvelous of writing. It was the storytelling. Like, I was so immersed in the book, and I like to call it, which it's ironic because I didn't know that she used this as marketing, but it's like the Christian equivalent to Twilight, because what it is basically the main two characters, the male, I talk about this book all the time, I've even talked about it on here, the male lead, he's seen into the spiritual realm of society since he was like 12, and not only in that, but he's had dreams of this girl. Now, one day, Tess, the main female character, starts having these, like, episodes where she's either seeing something, she has, like a vision of basically hell, is what it is, and she is so confused, and so she starts seeing into the spiritual realm just like he did, and not only that, but they start sharing dreams, and so they're just connected in this way, and it's really, she tells the story amazing, and I like books like that where it's so, like, insightful, where it's not, like, punch you in the face Christianity, but it's so real. Like, you can't read it and not get immersed in the entire story. Then with the Fifth Avenue Story Society, it was so different because that one was YA, kind of sci-fi fantasy kind of feel. Fifth Avenue Story Society was not, like, a Hallmark feel-good. It was like it was 5 personalities of 5 people who are mysteriously invited to the story society. Now, only one of them is a literary professor. The rest of them are just strangers who don't even know each other. One of them's an Uber driver who's a father of 2 twins who is recently divorced and doesn't have custody of his children. The other one is a widower who, he's, living by himself. He's not super connected with the community. He's just kind of floating along through life. The professor and his ex-wife is actually the other one invited to it. And she's this marketing agent, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. And then also a woman who owns a huge, like, makeup industry. So these people don't know each other at all. And they all get invited to this story society with almost no experience in the exact thing that they're talking about. They don't know what they're doing there. They don't know who told them to be there. And you see all these stories unravel, and it just caught my attention. And so I feel like I wish everyone had this moment where it was like you find a book and that just, like, connects you into a world. Because I've noticed that what I like to read is young adult fantasy, a little bit of science fiction. I don't really like hardcore science fiction. I can't get into it. I can't do the details. It just doesn't keep me. And then sweet romance. Those are the things that I like. I like romance, especially Rachel Hawk. She's probably my favorite author. She just weaves stories where there's enough drama that, it gets you going. Like, your heart is pounding. Like, so you're waiting to figure out what's going on. But then there also is always the root of there's a happily ever after. There's always some hope in Christ. Like, there's a Christian basis for it. And so I found what I'd like. And I think that just changed my perception. I had to rediscover reading. And so that's kind of what made me fall in love with it. And not only that, but that's kind of what jump-started me into becoming a writer, was just the idea that, okay, these are what I like to read. I am having such a hard time finding what I like to read out there. Now, not necessarily like the, Christian sweet fantasy, whatever, but more of the young adult books that are Christian or have clean values. Because, like I said in my very first episode, it is so hard to find popular books. Now, I'm not saying my books are popular. They're not popular by any means. But popular books that aren't filled with trash, or at least what I would call trash by my standards, is so hard for me. Like, and I also have said before, I don't think there should be any reason why whenever you're reading a book, you should feel shame about it. You should feel uncomfortable reading it in public. I think that books, are such a pure thing. It used to be like even Beauty and the Beast, you'd see Belle reading, out and about. And that was almost like a sign of beauty, was her just reading. Because, like, the innocence of it was, she would be reading a book. You wouldn't think of her as reading, some steamy trash that is what is produced right now. And so everyone can have their likes and dislikes, but I think that it's so oversaturated in the market right now. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity for other up-and-coming authors to rise up. I mean, I think that it's pretty cool what I've been able to accomplish by my age, but it takes a whole lot, not to be prideful about that stuff. And that's something that I do have to work on, I'm not, again, that just sounds like I'm trying to be arrogant. I'm really not. It's just something that I have to work on personally and spiritually. But that's just kind of where I got my start, and I will never take that for granted. I hate now looking back how many years I wasted, not reading as much or reading really at all. But at the same time, once I found what I liked, it was like an instant click. And like even now, I wish I had more time to write and read, all these different things. But at the same time, I'm happy that I had, some down years where I was literally just absorbing books back to back to back to back to back. I probably would go through, a series a week almost at one point. And not only that, but I was able to, through, a bunch of different means, get my hands on physical books. It's not cheap to have this many books, but how many books I've gotten secondhand. I have a local bookstore that I love so much. I try to support in every way I can. The money that they use funds, adult learning, and I've even donated some of my books there. But they will literally, I got this one that's behind me. It's like a gold sprayed edges copy, like hardback copy of Moby Dick, and I got it for $2 or $3. And almost like all their paperbacks are either $1 or $2, depending on the size. I've gotten so many good books from there. Not only that, but like Dollar Tree has started carrying books. Goodwill's always a good place to look. So there's just so many different ways that I've been very blessed to be able to find and be able to get my hands on books. And it also helps that I have a very wide margin of books that I like, type of books that I like. Now I do base this on clean, but I like horror, I like thriller, I like young adult, I like fantasy, I like sweet romance, I like Amish books, which that is not something you hear from a lot of 18-year-olds, almost 19-year-olds. Like, I just don't hear, honestly, anybody under the age of 55 say they like Amish books, but there's such a wholesome quality to it. Like, I genuinely find it very curious to read those type of books because they have, a strong faith basis, and they're interesting. Would I be Amish? Would that make me become Amish or want to seek that out? No. But do I think that it's incredibly interesting and that it's a very, devoted life that they live? Yes. I think that that's incredible that they are willing to do that. Now, do I also see problems with faith regarding that? Yes. But not everything you read, has to be exactly perfect. I'm not saying that books have to be perfect, but you also want there to be, good values and bad values. Part of discernment is being able to take good and bad out of things. But then there's discernment and corruption, Like, say you're reading something that has a bad guy. Now, I'm not saying this has anything to do with Amish books, but say you're reading a book and there's a good guy and a bad guy. You're not going to follow after the good guy. But if they're glorifying something that the bad guy is doing, then I think that, there's just certain things that I just feel like, hit or miss in different qualities. But let's go ahead and jump straight into a tip to leave you with. So my tip to leave you with today is to find your niche of books. I know that for me personally, like I've been talking about, finding the books that you like makes a huge difference on what you are able to read, when you are able to read, how invested you are in books. And I'm not saying that books have to become your entire life, but it makes a huge difference if you know and can enjoy what you read. So I just think that that's a very important thing to remember as you, go about searching for books. And you don't have to completely step out of your comfort zone every time you read a book. I said this in my episode last week. It's okay to read books that are the type of books you like. And I'm not saying to review on every book that you read, because sometimes there's just books that aren't the fit for you. If you had me read, ACOTAR, which is A Court of Thorns and Roses, if you had me read that, I would not be able to give a valid review of it because it is not something that I read. It's not something that I would enjoy reading. So there's just nothing that I would be able to give to that conversation. Now, I could have my own opinion about it outside of that, but I wouldn't review it as an honest reviewer. Same thing for reading, though, goes. I'm not going to read something that's, completely out of, it's okay to, explore a little bit, but just find what you enjoy reading and read that. I hope that you're able to find books that fit your niche and that they're not too hard to find. Like some of my favorite books have been, but, that also kind of makes it a hunt. I know that for myself personally, I love it whenever I go into a bookstore and I'm looking for a very specific book or author or whatever, especially if it's a thrift store, and I will search for books that I like, and it's like I've won the lottery if I find one, especially whenever it's like $1 to $2, and it's just unmatched. So that's just part of the upsides of finding books that, kind of fit your little niche. So I would definitely recommend that, and everything you do. Happy reading. Don't forget to like and rate this podcast and everything you do. Don't forget to like and rate this podcast, whether you're on Spotify or YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe, and thank you for listening so much.